My name is Diana Parker. I'm 32 years old. And 3 weeks ago, my parents humiliated me in front of 150 people at my father's retirement dinner. Not privately, not quietly, on a stage, with a microphone, while everyone laughed. My mother smiled and said, "At least Diana found a husband, even if we still don't know what he actually does." People chuckled. Some tried to hide it. Most didn't. My father stood right beside her and added something even worse, that I was his greatest disappointment. I remember sitting there, frozen, feeling smaller than I ever had in my entire life. But then, something happened that no one in that room was prepared for. My husband, the man they had ignored for 4 years, the man they thought was a nobody, slowly stood up. And when he walked toward that stage, I realized he wasn't standing up to defend himself. He was standing up to tell the truth about me. And what he revealed that night didn't just silence the room. It destroyed everything my family believed about success, about worth, and about who I really was. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to subscribe, especially if stories like this speak to you, because some truths you don't realize you need to hear until it's too late. Have you ever been made to feel like you were never enough by the very people who were supposed to love you? Because what happened that night started long before that dinner. And the truth is, they didn't just underestimate my husband. They chose to never really see me at all. And that was their biggest mistake. It started 6 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished a long day of parent-teacher conferences. My voice was tired, my feet hurt, and all I wanted was a quiet corner and a cup of coffee. The cafe near my school was crowded that day. Every table was taken, except one. A small table by the window, where a man sat typing on his laptop. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "Is this seat taken?" He looked up and smiled. "No, please." That was Marcus. We didn't talk much that first day. He worked. I graded papers. Just two strangers, sharing a table. But the next day, he was there again. And somehow, so was I. For 2 months, we met like that. Same table, same quiet rhythm. Eventually, we started talking. He told me he worked in education. I told him I taught 3rd grade, and that was it. No titles, no numbers, no trying to impress each other, just conversation. And for the first time in my life, I felt like someone was actually listening. Not to my last name, not to my family, not to what I was supposed to become. Just me. When he asked me to dinner, I didn't even let him finish the sentence. I said yes. We dated for 2 years. Simple dates, farmers markets, late night takeout, quiet weekends. He cooked. I talked about my students, and he listened, like every word mattered. He never asked about my family's money, and I never asked about his. Looking back, that should have meant something. But at the time, it just felt peaceful. When Marcus proposed, I said yes without hesitation. But I didn't tell my parents. Not right away. I waited 3 weeks, because I already knew what they were going to say. "He works in education," my mother asked, her voice already heavy with disappointment. "What does that even mean?" "It means he helps people learn," I said. She sighed. "So, he's just a teacher." That word, it followed me my entire life. Just a teacher, just average, just not enough. My father didn't even look up from his phone. "I had bigger hopes for you, Diana." That was all he said. No questions about Marcus, no curiosity, no interest, just judgment. Marcus never pushed me to explain them. One night, I asked him why. He looked at me, calm, steady, and said, "I don't need your family to approve of me. I just need you to know who I am." At the time, I thought that was confidence. Now, I think it was something else, something deeper. Because the truth is, my family had always measured worth in one way: money, status, power, and anything outside of that was invisible. Every holiday, every dinner, it was always the same. My younger sister Madison was the golden child. "Tell everyone about your latest deal," my mother would say. And Madison would smile, lean back in her chair, and talk about numbers. Big ones, 6 figures, 7 figures, and everyone would listen, like she was changing the world. Then, eventually, my mother would turn to me, "And you're still teaching, not, how are your students, not, do you love your job?" Just that, still teaching. Like I hadn't moved forward, like I was stuck. "I have a student," I'd say. "Trying anyway. She couldn't read 6 months ago, and now, that's nice, dear." And just like that, the conversation would move on. Like what I did didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. Marcus saw all of it. Every look, every comment, every quiet dismissal. And every time, he stayed silent. Because I asked him to. I told him it wasn't worth it. That it was easier this way. But one night, after dinner, after another comment from my sister, after another moment where I felt small, Marcus stood by the window, looking out at the city, and he said something I didn't fully understand at the time. "This won't last forever." I frowned. "What won't?" He turned to me, his expression calm, but something behind it had changed. "This version of them, and this version of you." I didn't know what he meant. Not then. But looking back now, I think Marcus saw something long before I did. He saw the pattern. He saw the truth. And maybe he was already preparing for the moment everything would finally break. The signs didn't appear all at once. They built slowly, quietly, like cracks in glass you don't notice, until one day, everything shatters. At first, I told myself it wasn't intentional. My parents were busy, my sister was ambitious, and I just didn't fit into their world. That's what I believed. Until the day I realized it wasn't that I didn't fit. It was that they never made space for me to belong. Last spring, my students performed their first school play. They had worked for months, memorizing lines, painting sets with their tiny hands, practicing over and over again, just to get it right. I invited my parents. I remember standing in my classroom, holding the phone tightly. "Dad, it's on the 15th, 3 o'clock. It would mean a lot if you came." There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "I have real meetings that day, Diana." "Real meetings." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Okay, maybe next time." But there was no next time, because that was the moment I understood something. My father had visited Madison's office 12 times that year. I counted, but he had never once stepped into my classroom. Not even for 5 minutes. Not even once. A week later, at Sunday brunch, Madison leaned closer to me. "You know he's disappointed, right?" Her voice was soft, but sharp enough to cut. "You had the same opportunities I did." I looked at her. We didn't. She wanted power. I wanted purpose. But I didn't say that. I just smiled, like I always did. Marcus was sitting beside me. He heard everything. And that night, when we got home, he didn't try to fix it. He didn't give me advice. He just held me and said quietly, "Your life has value, even if they refuse to see it." I wanted to believe him, but it's hard to believe something when the people who raised you spent years teaching you the opposite. The real turning point came a few days before the retirement dinner. It was a simple mistake, an email. My mother had meant to forward something to Madison. Instead, she sent it to me. At first, I didn't think much of it, until I opened it and read the words that were never meant for me. "Make sure Diana and her husband are seated at the back." I felt my chest tighten, but I kept reading. "We don't want them talking to the investors. I don't trust what he might say." My hands started shaking, and then, the last line, "And remind Diana not to go on about her school. This isn't the place for that." I read it once, twice, 3 times. Each time, it hurt a little more, because this wasn't careless. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was deliberate. They didn't just overlook me. They managed me, controlled where I sat, what I said, who I could speak to, like I was something to be hidden. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. Marcus walked in, took one look at my face, and knew. They did something again, didn't they? I nodded. I couldn't speak. I just handed him the phone. He read the email slowly. His expression didn't change at first, but I saw it in his eyes. Something shifted. Something settled. Like a decision had been made. "They seated us in the back," I whispered. He handed the phone back to me, then sat down beside me. "Do you still want me to go?" The question surprised me. For a moment, I considered saying no, protecting him, shielding him from them. But then, a different thought came, a quieter one, but stronger. Why should he be the one who stays away? Why should I keep shrinking, just to make them comfortable? "Yes," I said softly, "I want you there." He nodded, and then, after a pause, he added something I had never heard before. "I've stayed quiet for 4 years, because you asked me to." His voice was calm, but there was weight behind it now. "But if they cross the line again..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I felt a chill run through me. "Marcus," I said carefully, "what do you mean?" He looked at me, steady, unreadable. "I mean, it's time they understand something." "Understand what?" He held my gaze for a moment longer, then simply said, "You'll see." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that email, about every moment I had stayed silent, every time I let something slide, every time I told myself it wasn't worth the conflict. But lying there in the dark, I realized something I had been avoiding for years. Silence doesn't create peace. It creates permission. Permission for people to keep treating you like you don't matter. And for the first time in my life, I started to wonder, what would happen if I stopped allowing it? Because deep down, I had a feeling that dinner wasn't going to end quietly. And somehow, Marcus already knew it too. The night of the dinner arrived. Quietly. But it didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like walking into something I couldn't control. The ballroom at the Hartwell Hotel was everything my father loved. Elegant, expensive, impressive. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft golden light across the room. A live band played in the corner. Waiters moved like clockwork, serving champagne to guests dressed in designer suits and evening gowns. 150 people, business partners, investors, friends who mattered, people my father respected. Marcus and I arrived right on time. He wore a simple navy suit. Clean, classic, nothing flashy. I wore a black dress I had owned for years. It wasn't new, it wasn't expensive, but it was mine. At the entrance, my mother stood greeting guests. Perfect posture, perfect smile. She looked like she belonged there. "Diana," she said, air kissing my cheek. "You made it." Of course I did. Her eyes shifted, landing on Marcus. "And you brought him." "My husband," I said calmly. She forced a smile. "Of course. Table 14, in the back." We hadn't even asked yet. We moved through the crowd. I could feel the looks, the whispers. "That's her." The older daughter. The teacher. We reached our table, and it was worse than I imagined. Not just in the back, almost inside the kitchen. Every time the door swung open, heat and noise spilled into the room. Waiters brushed past us constantly. It wasn't just a bad seat. It was a message. "Stay out of the way." Marcus pulled out my chair. "Comfortable?" he asked quietly. I gave a small smile. "It's perfect." We both knew it wasn't. A few minutes later, a woman from the next table turned toward us. Sharp eyes, confident posture. I recognized her immediately. Jennifer Walsh, one of my father's most important partners. She studied Marcus for a moment, not casually, carefully. "Have we met before?" she asked. Marcus smiled politely. "I don't think so." She frowned slightly, like she didn't believe him. Then she reached for her phone, scrolling, comparing, glancing back at him again. Something in her expression shifted. Recognition. But before she could say anything, the lights dimmed. The room quieted. My father took the stage, but just before he spoke, Madison appeared at our table, a glass of champagne in her hand. "Wow," she said, looking around. "You actually showed up." I looked at her. "Why wouldn't I?" She shrugged. "Just didn't think this was really your scene." Her eyes moved to Marcus. "Nice suit," she added. "Simple." "Thank you," Marcus said calmly. Madison tilted her head. "So remind me, what do you do again?" "I work in education." She smiled. That kind of smile that isn't kind at all. "Education," she repeated slowly. "So, basically the same as Diana." I felt my hands tighten in my lap. "Madison, I'm just saying," she cut in lightly. "It's cute, you two match." She took a sip of her drink, clearly enjoying herself. "Well, at least you found each other." Then she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough. "But next time, try not to draw too much attention, okay? There are important people here." And just like that, she walked away, leaving silence behind her. Marcus reached for my hand under the table. His grip was steady, warm. "Are you okay?" he asked. I stared ahead, at the stage, at my father, standing under the lights. "No," I said honestly. "Do you want to leave?" For a second, I almost said yes, but then I remembered the email, the table, the years of being overlooked. "No," I whispered. "I'm not leaving." Marcus nodded, and then he said something that made my chest tighten. "They really don't know. Do they?" "Know what I asked?" He didn't answer. On stage, my father began his speech. Confident, polished. The room listened. He thanked his partners, praised his career, celebrated Madison. Applause filled the room. And then, his eyes found me. From across the ballroom, he smiled. But it wasn't a proud smile. It was something else. "And Diana," he said. My heart stopped. "My eldest daughter." A pause, just long enough. "She's still figuring things out." Laughter, soft at first, then louder. I felt my face burn. "And that's okay," he continued. "Not everyone is meant to lead. Some people are meant to support." More laughter, more eyes turning toward me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Beside me, Marcus was no longer holding my hand. I turned. His chair was empty. "Marcus," I whispered. But he was already walking, calm, steady, toward the stage. And suddenly, the room wasn't laughing anymore, because they were starting to notice something was about to happen. And this time, no one was going to be able to ignore it. At first, no one understood what was happening. They just watched, confused, curious. A man from the back of the room, walking toward the stage during the middle of a speech. That wasn't how events like this worked. My father noticed him first. His voice faltered, just for a second. Then he forced a smile. "Can I help you?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He stepped onto the stage. Calm, composed, like he belonged there, like he had every right to be there. The room went quiet, completely quiet. Even the band had stopped playing. "I just need a moment," Marcus said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, clear, steady, unshaken. My mother stepped forward quickly. "This really isn't appropriate," she said, reaching for the microphone. Marcus gently moved it back toward himself. "I think it is." There was no anger in his tone, and somehow that made it more powerful. My father chuckled awkwardly. "Marcus, right? Diana's husband." A few people laughed nervously. "Why don't we talk about this later?" Privately, Marcus looked at him. Then he said one word. "Number." It didn't sound loud, but it landed. Heavy. For a moment, no one moved. "For 4 years, Marcus continued, I've sat quietly at your family's table." His eyes moved across the room. "I've listened to comments, questions that weren't really questions, and judgments that were never earned." My mother crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous." Madison stepped closer to the stage. "This is embarrassing," she added. "Diana, come get your husband." But I didn't move. I couldn't, because something inside me knew. This moment had been coming for a long time. Marcus didn't look at them. He looked at the audience. "At every dinner, every holiday, you made assumptions about me." He paused, and more importantly, about her. He turned slightly, his eyes finding mine, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel small. "I stayed quiet," he continued, "because Diana asked me to." His voice softened, just for a moment, but silence has a limit. Madison laughed. "Oh, please," she said, "this is so dramatic." She stepped forward and grabbed the microphone. "Let's be honest here," she said, turning to the crowd. "We don't even know what this guy does." A few awkward smiles appeared. "Education, right?" she continued. "So what? Tutoring, teaching?" "Something like that." She shrugged. "Whatever it is, this isn't the time." She handed the microphone back to Marcus, as if dismissing him, as if the moment was over. But it wasn't. Not even close. Marcus took the microphone again, and then he smiled. Not arrogantly, not angrily, just calmly. "You're right," he said. The room stilled again. "I do work in education." Madison rolled her eyes. "Exactly, but not in the way you think." That made her pause. Just for a second, Marcus adjusted his jacket slightly, like he was preparing, not to defend himself, but to finish something. "I don't tutor," he said. "I don't grade papers." He looked around the room, at the investors, the executives, the people who thought they understood success. "I build systems." A small ripple moved through the crowd. Confusion, curiosity. "I build platforms that help schools reach students they've been failing for decades." Jennifer Walsh stood up suddenly. Her chair scraped against the floor. "I knew it," she said under her breath. My father turned toward her. "Jen," but she wasn't looking at him. She was staring at Marcus, wide-eyed. "You," she whispered. Marcus finally said the words. "My company is called EduSpark." Silence. Not the polite kind. Not the confused kind. This was different. This was the kind of silence that happens when everything changes. Across the room, people started pulling out their phones, whispering, looking at each other, recognizing the name. Jennifer stepped forward. "You're the founder," she said. "The one from the Forbes cover." Marcus nodded once. "That's right." My father's expression shifted. Confusion, to disbelief, to something closer to fear. "That's not possible," Madison said quickly, but her voice didn't sound certain anymore. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply continued. EduSpark was valued at over $200 million this year. A wave moved through the room. Gasps, murmurs, shock. "I've spent the last 5 years working with school districts, state programs, and federal initiatives." He paused, then added quietly, "trying to fix a system that people like Diana have been holding together on their own." My mother's hand moved to her chest. My father didn't speak. He couldn't, because in that moment, everything they thought they knew about success, about value, about me, was collapsing in front of them. But Marcus wasn't finished. Not yet. And what he said next wasn't about him at all. It was about me. And that was the part no one in that room was ready for. The room was still. No one spoke. No one moved. It felt like time itself had slowed, just enough for the truth to sink in. Marcus stood there, calm, grounded, completely in control. But when he spoke again, his voice changed, softer, more personal. "This isn't about me." He turned and looked directly at me, and in that moment, I felt something I had never felt before in that room. Seen. "Diana teaches children most people have already given up on," he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. "She stays late. Long after the school day ends, I felt my throat tighten. She spends her own money on supplies, books, things her students need. I saw people in the audience shift, their expressions changing. She doesn't do it for recognition. She doesn't do it for money. He paused. She does it because she believes those kids matter. My vision blurred. I hadn't realized I was crying until I felt the tears. And you call her a disappointment. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to, because now every word landed. Heavy. My father looked down. My mother said nothing. For the first time in my life, they didn't have an answer. Marcus reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a document. A thick envelope, the one I had seen the night before. I brought something tonight, he said. The room leaned in. This is a $10 million grant. A collective gasp filled the space to fund STEM programs in underprivileged schools across the state. He paused, then looked at me again. The first school on that list, my heart stopped, is Diana's. The silence broke, but not into laughter, not into whispers, into something else. Respect. Real, undeniable respect. She didn't ask for this, Marcus continued. She didn't even know about it. He held the document up slightly. This isn't charity. His voice was steady. It's an investment. In teachers like her. In students like hers. In a future that people like you. He glanced briefly at my parents. Have chosen not to see. I couldn't stand it anymore. Not the silence, not the weight. I stood up. My legs trembled. But I didn't sit back down. Because something inside me had finally shifted. I walked forward. Each step lighter than the last. Not because the room had changed, but because I had. When I reached the stage, Marcus stepped back slightly, not to take over, but to give me space. For the first time, this wasn't about proving anything. It was about speaking. I took the microphone. My hands were steady. My name is Diana Parker. A few people nodded. Some looked at me differently now. I'm the daughter who never quite measured up. A quiet ripple moved through the room. For years, I thought that meant there was something wrong with me. I looked at my parents, really looked at them. But tonight, I realized something. My voice didn't shake. Nothing was wrong with me. The silence deepened. I chose a life that mattered to me. I chose a career that helps people. I chose a partner who sees me for who I am. I reached for Marcus's hand, and he held it, firm, certain, and that should have been enough. I turned back to the room, but it wasn't, because in this family, I paused. Value was measured in money. No one interrupted. No one looked away. But here's the truth, I said quietly. If Marcus had been exactly who you thought he was, I let the words hang. If he had been a tutor, or a teacher, or someone with no title at all, I met my mother's eyes. Would what you said tonight have been okay? She didn't answer. She couldn't. That's the problem, I said. You didn't treat me poorly because you didn't know. You treated me poorly because you didn't care to know. The words settled. Final. Clear. I took a breath. From this point on, my voice softened, but it didn't weaken. Respect is not optional. It's not earned through status, or money, or who I'm married to. It's basic, and if you can't give me that, I squeezed Marcus's hand gently. Then I'm done asking for it. No anger, no shouting, just truth. And sometimes, that's louder than anything else. I stepped away from the microphone. The room didn't clap. It didn't need to, because something had already happened. Something bigger than applause. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't explaining. I was simply standing, and somehow, that felt like more than enough. If you step back and look at this story, not as a daughter, not as a parent, but as an observer, you begin to see something deeper. This was never really about money. It was about validation, about what happens when a child grows up believing they have to earn love instead of simply receiving it. In many families, success becomes the language of worth, and anything outside that definition gets dismissed. Over time, that quiet dismissal turns into something heavier. Doubt, silence, and eventually distance. But here's the truth. Real value is not measured by income or titles or how impressive your life looks to others. It's measured by impact, by presence, by the lives you touch when no one is watching. Diana didn't become valuable that night. She always was. The only thing that changed was that she finally stopped asking others to confirm it. And maybe that's the part of this story that matters most. So if this story stayed with you, even just a little, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes, hearing the right story at the right time can change the way you see yourself. And maybe that's where real change begins.